Good evening. My name is Mary Ruth Snyder, and I'm the Executive Director for the Campbell River and District Chamber of Commerce. And we, along with Campbell River Mere and the Tidemark Theatre Society, have been co-hosting a series of debates for the BC Municipal Election. This is our final debate, the School District 72 School Trustee candidates. We honor our relationship with the Lakwata people and the Wiwakai, the Wiwakam, all the Métis and Inuit that reside in Campbell River and in the Lakwata territory. Thank you so much for coming this evening. We will begin shortly. Good evening, candidates. To my far left, we have candidate Eddy. Beside her, we have candidate Gillis. Beside candidate Gillis is candidate Hagan, candidate Harper, candidate Kelly, candidate McMahon, and candidate Yasek. Now we'll begin with your introductory statements. Candidate Eddy, you are up for 90 seconds.
Good evening. I would like to start by honoring that we are here this evening on the territories of the Lakwata people. I would further like to recognize the Homolko First Nations and all other First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people who reside in these lands. My name is Kat Eddy, and it is a great honor to be here this evening with my esteemed colleagues and to thank them for stepping forward to engage in this important work. I am a mom, a stepmom, wife, and daughter in an intergenerational household. My youngest son, the youngest of our 4 boys, is in grade 12 at Carey High. Professionally, I've led the Campbell River Literacy Association as Executive Director for the past 8 years and have worked as a literacy practitioner for the last 13. My work allows me to support, leverage, and advocate for community members struggling with literacy and reconnections to education. I have had the privilege of governing alongside a progressive, equitable, and well-rounded school board and senior management team for 4 years, with the last 2 seeing me seated as vice chair. I've had the opportunity to observe contract negotiations with both our local teachers and CUPE unions, and wish to acknowledge that every team member here in SD72 comes to the work with a passion for supporting children. It has been an honor to have been elected as a governor in this system, and regardless of the results of this election, and the experience will guide me and inform my work for the rest of my career. Gila Kesla, thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Gillis.
Thank you so much. And I would also like to acknowledge the land of the Lakwata people, the site for this gathering this evening. As a potential school trustee, I've asked, what is it I can offer and which values will guide me? At heart, I'm a learner. I'm an educator. For 32 school districts, 72 years, my life was devoted to helping students, teachers, administrators develop skills and confidence, building blocks for success. I believe in a partnership between community and schools. Challenged resources prompt us to work strategically and collaboratively so that dollars support student achievement. As a trustee, I strive to be responsible, inclusive, and caring. Our district's annual budget is an example of responsible management. The strategic plan identifies specific measures to assess student progress. Inclusive. Public education strives to provide the best supports possible for all students. Ethnicity, gender, religion, cognitive or social challenges should not diminish a student's self-worth or promise. Our local path to truth and reconciliation is an important one. Caring. I hope that my dealings with students, parents, staff, and co-workers have been characterized as such. When students and adults are valued, when we see them as who they can and will become, not necessarily who they are today, they will be. I vow to bring this experience and this heart if you give me the opportunity to serve for you. Thank you.
Candidate Hagan.
Yes, my name's Daryl Hagan. When I was a kid, we moved here to Campbellton School, and I failed that grade. We'd moved so many times that I got lost in the cracks, and then we moved again. I went to Willow Point School, and one principal and one teacher saw this skinny little guy and said, "You can do better than that, Daryl. If you get an A on your next test, I'll move you up to grade 4. And you know what? It changed my life. I have this passion now. I graduated president of my class at university. I tried out for the Olympic team. I ran a jail for 31 years for young offenders, and I've been on the school board now for 31 years. I have tried my best because I think every child matters, and that you have to have that. Teachers are so valuable because they are right there and they see these children, and we can make a difference. I think we need to teach ourselves to love ourselves first and then love our neighbors as ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Harper.
Gila Kessler. I have many reasons for being here this evening, and I would encourage you to go to my Facebook page or the Mirror to read my bio. I have over 30 years of institutional knowledge in the Campbell River School District, which make me incredibly well qualified for this role. There are many issues facing this board, not the least of which is the sizable structural deficit that the incumbent trustees are leaving to the new board to deal with next spring. But I digress. What I really want to talk about is a sense of community. I'm astonished at the number of portables I'm seeing at some of our elementary schools, in one in particular. The board has gutted the south end, the board has gutted the north end. There's no sense of community left. Schools are community, and community are schools. And yet there's been choices that have made in the past that I think need to be addressed. Obviously, Cedar School is a major issue, but I don't think Cedar can be addressed in isolation from looking at the overall picture. And I think a configuration study looking at the enrollment patterns and how this district can best serve not just individual students, but each unique neighborhood of Campbell River is long overdue.
Thank you. Thank you, Candidate Harper. Candidate Kelly.
Hi, my name is Elena Kelly, and I am a longtime citizen of Campbell River. I graduated from Southgate in 1991, and my son graduated from Carey High in 2001 with honors, and he particularly loved the Carey High's Baseball Academy. I would be what you would consider a conservative candidate. I am also a Christian woman who hopes to live in a peaceful world where we care for our children's mental, physical, and sexual health. According to the direction of our education system, schools are to develop students in their individual potentials, to acquire knowledge, skills, and attitudes needed to contribute to a healthy society with a prosperous and sustainable economy. I myself am alarmed at the gender-confusing materials being introduced to the youngest and most vulnerable members of our society. We've come through a hard 3 years, and my heart goes towards our children. They have had their faces covered. They've seen our faces covered. We've been socially separating them and frightening them for fear of killing their loved ones. I have counter beliefs to many of the sitting here and at this debate tonight. But once I become a school trustee, I will honor and respect the elected, hired, and volunteer members of the BC education system, and with a gentle demeanor. Know, though, that I will vote according to my conscience with love and compassion in my heart for all and for the best of our students. I will hear and account for family and citizen concerns. I do believe family matters, education matters. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate McMahon. Candidate McMahon.
Hello, Gila Kessler. I am Joyce McMahon, and I'd like to begin with expressing my gratitude for the life that I have been able to live here on the lands of the Legal people. I first discovered a keen interest in young children while I was working a summer job in high school, a recreation program, and I have continued studies and embarked on some lifelong learning that has allowed me to work with children and families in our community for longer than I've been advised to admit. I, over the years, have had the privilege of working in a variety of roles and in a broad spectrum of committees and initiatives within the community. And I believe very strongly in the power and responsibility of a public education system to create a civil and democratic society. I understand very strongly the responsibility that trustees take on in asking families and the community to trust us in using their taxpayers' dollars, and the outline of the British Columbia Province School Act to be able to create an atmosphere in which children can thrive and leave feeling they have the skills, knowledge, and confidence to meet the challenges of their life. Thank you. Gila Kesla.
Candidate Yasik.
Good evening. Thank you all for coming tonight, and all of you that are out there listening, and those that have sponsored this event. And if I've forgotten somebody, I'm very, very sorry. I am very nervous, and I apologize. I'm having a very bad allergy day. Please take that into account if I go a little spacey. A little bit more about me. My dad was in the military. I grew up moving back and forth between the island and the East Coast, mostly small towns. I have a bachelor degree in science, emphasis in nutrition and biology. I got that from the University of Prince Edward Island. I've worked as a server and a registered massage therapist. My family and I moved back to the island after 5 years in Ottawa. My husband and I have one child who just started grade 2 this year, and he's watching, so hi, Ben. I decided to run for school board trustee because I am passionate about education, and I want to be able to help ensure that the children in our area have access to the best education possible in a safe, inclusive, and comfortable environment that meets the needs of everyone, no matter their abilities or backgrounds. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all the candidates. And I just would like to thank the audience for their enthusiasm. But we do have 7 candidates, and we need to get through the questions. So I would ask that you hold your applause until the very, very end, because I know the candidates have a lot to say. So we are going to start the first question with candidate Gillis. What are your top 3 priorities as a school trustee if elected?
Thank you. You know, it's always difficult to focus on just 3 priorities, because I think we all want to change the world and we want to affirm what is working so well. But I think the first is that student success is paramount. Quite clearly, if our school system supports the development of strong literacy and numeracy, we create a foundation for success. We know that early learning, school readiness, often translates into school success, and we need to continue to explore ways of supporting our most vulnerable. Giving all students a safe place, their school and classroom, enables them to gain the confidence knowing someone believes in, someone supports them. The gift of reading, writing, artistic expression can shift the trajectory of a life. Timely recruitment and planned retention of skilled, inspiring staff can pay dividends by investing in the skill and passion of dedicated teachers willing to continue to learn their craft and reach all students. I also, as Mr. Harper has suggested, feel that a school like Cedar is a really important focus for our district. I've reviewed school board minutes and kept pace with some of the recommendations of the current board, and replacement of school needs our advocacy. A bright, open setting can have such impact on how students and staff feel about their host school, and this could be such an important opportunity to create an exciting learning center with input from our Indigenous community, so well represented in the school. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Hagan?
Like I mentioned, I've been on the board maybe 31 years as of a few days ago, and I was so honored and privileged to sign the first First Nations agreement in the province. We sat down with the Minister of Education and all the chiefs from this area, and when I look over the past things that I perhaps accomplished with the help of everyone else is to say that relationship has been growing and growing and growing. We also need to build working relationships within our district where families and teachers and our support staff feel as if they can make choices and be involved in their children's education. We just don't send them to school and expect us to raise them. We need to build that culture, and we do that over a long period of time where there's trust, understanding, giving. I have a number of different priorities that I have here on my list, but I'll just give you a couple right now. That's good. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Harper.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, first and foremost, one of the roles of a school trustee is to pass a balanced budget, because if the board does not pass a balanced budget, they are fired. As CRDTA president, I sat through hundreds of board meetings and dozens of budget consultations. This will be a difficult task. There's a sizable structural deficit. I know where a good $700,000 of that structural deficit is. That doesn't even begin to solve it. Another priority for me would be the whole issue of retention and not recruitment. I would propose that we need a policy that says that any teacher who's continuing who leaves the district with more than 10 years seniority for another district, there needs to be an exit interview. It is not happening. This district is losing experienced teachers and institutional knowledge to other school districts, and we need to find out why. It's a huge issue. Lastly, I want to see an organizational review of all of the schools and the configurations based on the enrollment data both now and projected, so we can decide whether or not we have the best fit for our community and what we're doing right now. Maybe K-5, 6, 8, 9, 12 just doesn't cut it anymore. It did 10 years ago. It may not now.
Thank you. And candidate Kelly.
So I hope to co-create a safe, sound, and strong education system for our students, improving achievement and wellness. My top 3 priorities would be to witness our students to have a good elementary experience and then graduate with honors, to have a solid view of who they are, becoming capable and functioning adults who are employable, thriving, and have love in their hearts and respect for all people. I believe children are precious and vulnerable. I feel a moral obligation to serve our youth. It is reported that we see an increase in student suicides, depressions, anxieties, with a rise in youth pregnancies, an increase in drug-induced sex changes and bodily mutilations, with an increase in mental health instabilities and sexual abuses. I ask myself if something could be happening within our schools in BC. And why do we see these increases? I hope to co-create a safe and sound education system in hopes to see a rise in the good mental health status of our students. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate McMahon.
Yes, I think at the center of all of the priorities is that of helping students achieve success. And that will look different for every student, but we need them to leave school feeling they have what they need to meet the challenges of their life. I think that it's difficult to separate priorities one from another because it's a very holistic system. We need to look at how to continue to eliminate the inequities in Indigenous grad rates while improving overall grad rates for all children. We need to ensure that schools are safe and caring places for everyone to belong and thrive. We must acknowledge and honor the many ways of being and being smart outside of what has traditionally been the model. And we need to advocate the provincial government to give us the funding in order that we can meet these priorities. There are many elements within the budget that have not changed for 10, sometimes 20 years, and we need to look at ways in which we can pressure the province to give us the funds that we need to be able to provide both the human and material resources to meet our biggest goal, which is students.
Thank you. Candidate Yasik.
My highest 3 priorities. Well, first is as everyone has pretty much said here, the success of our students. I would like to see our students excited to go to school, not feeling, I have spoke with a few parents. That's kind of what I do a lot of. I speak with a lot of people before, after, anytime I'm out at an event, and see what's going on with their kids and what they'd like to see. And there are some kids that are leaving and they don't want to go because they feel like they're kind of being left behind. And so I guess working a little bit further to make them excited. They're not going to feel like, oh, I'm behind everybody already, and this is in elementary school. Another priority and is to continue working with the First Nations and the reconciliation that everybody can be more educated and feel more welcome, and that there will be higher and higher percentages of graduates, that everybody can feel the part of the community and not just different sects. And my time's up, sorry. Thanks.
Thank you. And candidate Eddie.
There are a number of priorities facing public education right now. Provincially, we do have had a change at a provincial level with our ministry, so it's no longer just the Ministry of Education, it's the Ministry of Education, Children and Families. Here in Campbell River, we have been approved for 6 sites for before and after school care. The next 4 years are going to see us trying that model on, really getting it right, so that the families that are accessing those facilities for before and after school care are seeing organized programs. Of course, I want to always examine and dig into the historical disparities between Indigenous and non-Indigenous learners. We need to ensure equity for all learners. There is no reason why our Indigenous kids shouldn't be excelling the same way that our non-Indigenous kids are. I also want to look at leaning into our community partners. There is a crisis, a mental health crisis happening in our schools, not only with our kids, but with our staff as well. COVID has highlighted some of those pieces, and we need help. As a school district, we need help from our community partners to help address the mental health crisis. It's happening provincially. The numbers are staggering. And finally, of course, I want to rebuild Cedar. Cedar deserves it. Those kids deserve a beautiful building full of community partnerships that allow them to thrive and achieve.
Thank you. Now, the next question, we'll start with candidate Hagen. Knowing that 20% of the student population in Campbell River identify as Indigenous, how will UNDRIP, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, as well as Truth and Reconciliation, guide your decisions as a school trustee?
Well, as you well know, that it was already approved provincially, and it will come down to all of our districts where we try to integrate these things. But I think we've worked at it for quite a long time now. We sit down, we negotiate what's best for Indigenous families, what's best for their children, and are we seeing an improvement? We have to measure it, and we have to compare and say, are we doing a better job than we were before? And there are all kinds of different. I was on the board when we hired Daisy Seawood, and she saved the local language here because there was only 5 or 6 speakers left. We just gave money towards saving another language here in Campbell River that we funded on our own. We just took the money out of our accounts, and we're trying to save the language, the culture, the way they learn, and just build on it, because I go into schools now, and when I was a kid, there would be fights in the hallways, and now I see graduates who are marching proudly up with their drums, and they're excited about learning, and they're moving on to all different ways of learning and different kinds of careers. I think we can do a better job, but I think that we built trust and respect for a long time here.
Thank you. And candidate Harper.
Well, the United Nations passed the UNDRIP, and it's formed the foundation of reconciliation. But I think that we make a severe error in not saying truth and reconciliation. My experience in this community and around this province, and definitely at the place where I pump gas Monday to Friday, tells me there are a lot of people in this community from ages 6 to 60 to 86 who do not understand the truth of what happened to our Indigenous peoples in Canada's history, or they don't want to hear it, or they deny it. And until we get to the point where there's an acceptance of the truth, reconciliation is going to be difficult. I don't want reconciliation in our schools to be something that we talk about, but doesn't really happen because people are not buying in. And that's what I fear will happen. People will not buy in. It will become yet another slogan. That's what I saw on Orange Shirt Day. I dealt with many people at the pumps, and it was a sad state of affairs. And I think that the gas pumps are probably a pretty good measure of what's going on in our community.
Thank you. Candidate Kelly.
Okay, so DRIPA adopts the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. UNDRIP and DRIPA are guiding frameworks for reconciliation while improving Indigenous student achievement. As an elected trustee, I would commit to learning more on this matter. I was blessed to attend the National Truth and Reconciliation events last week. As a school trustee, I would partake in further such events. I would listen, hear, feel, and learn, creating a safe and inclusive environment for all students. Looking forward to witnessing the graduation rates of the Indigenous peoples soar and with great excellency. Healing is needed, and healing comes easier with apology. I am sorry for the horrors the Indigenous people suffered at the hands of an overreaching government who, with an iron fist, facilitated the removal and physical and sexual abuse of the Indigenous people, all done wrongly in the name of God. I caution all people to remember the overextended powers a government can have. History repeats itself, and may we never again allow our government to remove First Nations people from their homes or treat them like lesser people ever again. And I stand on that for all families and all people.
Thank you. And Candidate McMahon.
Yes, the underlying principle of UNDRIP is to honor the Indigenous worldviews and perspectives. I think Justice Murray Sinclair, in his work with the Truth and Reconciliation, said it well when he said, education got us into this mess, and it's education that is going to have to see us through it. Truth and Reconciliation asks us to consider the political will, trust building, accountability, and transparency as a way for us to get to a better place. I think that the district has done some significant work. We have a long way to go. We have already undertaken an equity scan to try and better understand where we're falling down and where we can achieve some growth. I think we have helped in assigning a district support teacher for Indigenous learning. We have committed budgetary expenditures to providing resources to be able to support a policy where every employee in the district, that's 900 employees about, to undergo training and reflect a more inclusive view of how Indigenous children can thrive.
Thank you. Candidate Yasik.
I think a lot of it comes, as many up here have said, is listening and learning. The more we listen, the more we realize how little we actually know. And as we continue to listen to our First Nations, we can ask, what is it that you feel that you need in our schools? What do you feel will help your children to become successful individuals in the world, in your band or wherever they choose to locate themselves. And basically listen and learn is what I guess my answer is on that.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Eddie.
It's always super hard to follow Trustee McMahon or Candidate McMahon on Indigenous issues because she's so passionate. So we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do as Canadians. We have a lot of work to do as educators. We are just stepping into the truth of the history of Indigenous peoples here in our country. And we, as people working in public education, must dig into that. We must acknowledge that the histories that we were taught were not correct. I think about the Indigenous worldview of holding the child at the center. Education must hold the child at the center. We must look to our Indigenous partners and their role modeling for how to educate their children. I also am keenly aware of the capacity within Indigenous communities and how the Ministry of Education always tells us we need to consult. And I look around our Indigenous communities and see how many consultations and how many pieces they're responsible for in leading their nations. I think we have to be cognizant of that and respectful of their time as we're talking about moving forward in education. In SD72, I'm proud of the work that our Indigenous Education Department has done in my last 4 years sitting at the board, but I know that they're passionate of pushing it forward and continuing to engage the citizens of Campbell River around the history of Canada.
Thank you. Candidate Gillis.
Thank you. You know, priority 3 of the strategic plan, honor Indigenous worldviews and perspectives, tells us the school district is on the right path. Yet we have to begin by listening to those shared stories and those truths of our Indigenous nations. And sometimes we've not done a very good job. I believe that elders and knowledge keepers will play a significant role in the next steps we take towards truth and reconciliation. We've come to learn that we are all responsible as education, in educational change. We are all responsible for supporting equity, diversity, inclusion. It's not simply the role of our Indigenous support workers, but all members of our school teams. Our commitment must be to renew and deepen the relationships with inclusion at the center as we listen and learn from the Indigenous experience and knowledge. I welcome the First Nations Peoples course that is now going to be a graduation requirement. Social Studies 11 or English 11 will be a First Peoples course that all students will take. And I applaud the burgeoning era of literature right now, authorship of our Indigenous populations. We had, as you may know, Bev Sellers as the Haig Brown Writer in Residence. And to all of you here, if you have not read 2 of her books, They Call Me Number 1 and Price Paid, I urge you to do so. It will deepen our sense. We are just beginning, but we can do this and we can build capacity. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question will start with candidate Harper. As a trustee, how would you inform yourself on teacher perspectives, issues, and concerns? And once informed, do you see your role as an advocate for teachers, particularly regarding issues and concerns?
I am a teacher. I taught for 30 years. I taught French immersion. I taught English. I think I understand teachers very well. I think I understand the Campbell River system very well. The Campbell River system has become very insular. It doesn't listen to its teachers. It doesn't listen to its educational assistants or its custodians. How do I know this? Because I've been in the district for 30 years, and this is a small community, and people talk. There's a lot of dissatisfaction in the line staff, I'll call them. I'm being blunt here. Everyone in the room says, boy, I don't know about this guy. I'm speaking the truth, folks. Let's look at the district engagement survey number 2. I would encourage all of you, you can't look at it because senior management won't let anyone see it. Why? It says right here in this document, there'll be a 5% improvement on morale of staff in that survey. Was there? Wasn't there? No one knows. It's not good enough. I'm done.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Kelly.
Thank you. I, as an elected school trustee, would associate with the different associations in place for our teachers, such as the BCTF, the BCSTA, and the CSBA, the BCCPAC. And I would introduce myself to our local DPACs and our local PACs. I would educate myself on who the different stakeholders are within our education system, what projects they've been creating, and of their specific interests affecting our teachers and our students. Teachers have been introduced perspectives such as the ARC Foundation and the Gender Sexuality Alliance Clubs, like the Rainbow Club. Teachers have had a new type of gender-based reading materials introduced into their classrooms, and I wonder how this affects both teachers and students and that relationship. I would, as a trustee, attend meetings, school assemblies, and classrooms, listen, hear, read, and research. Encourage parental attendance and assistance in the classrooms, and I would stay current with the time-to-time educational orders from the Minister of Education. And that is how I would stay up to date with teacher perspectives.
Thank you. And Candidate McMahon.
Yes, I think the importance of our system lies strongly in the culture that we can create and maintain, and I would agree with Candidate Harper that there is room for improvement. We've been through a very difficult past 2 years. I think the morale of both teachers, students, families, and certainly people of the general public has been hit hard. Not everyone has quite such a pessimistic view of the system as trustee or Candidate Harper would allude to. I think there is a growing sense of optimism that we can work together. The goal of the board, as I've known it, is always to try and open the lines of communication. The engagement survey that I think Candidate Harper alludes to was done some time ago, and the results of that were quite alarming. There has been a significant shift in the senior management team, and I think the culture that is emanating from that shift is a positive one that will see us through to a better place than we have been in the past. I'm optimistic that we can open those lines of communication and work together positively.
Thank you. Candidate Yasik.
Well, that's kind of very complicated issue, actually. A lot of it comes down, I know, to funding and being able to have the supports there that are needed. And I mean, that is a very tough job, allocating where the money is going to be spent and where it's not. I would like to, I am very interested in attending different meetings if I was welcomed into them as a trustee, like board meetings at the school, teacher meetings, PAC meetings, hearing what the public feels, what maybe some of the teachers have expressed to the parents, and then hearing directly from the parents and just listening and going, okay, what can we do with what we have so they know that we care about them? We are trying our best to support them in this very important role that they have. I'm finished.
Okay, thank you. And Candidate Eddy, would you like me to repeat the question?
Please, if you don't mind.
Okay. So as a trustee, how would you inform yourself on teacher perspectives, issues, and concerns? And once informed, do you see your role as an advocate for teachers, particularly regarding issues and concerns?
I do see myself as an advocate for teachers regarding issues and concerns, but I ask that it be kept in mind that as a trustee, we are actually the employers. So when it comes to contract negotiations, both local and provincially, we have a duty of responsibility to act as employers on that side of the table. I totally believe that building comprehensive and collective relationships with our educators is highly important and valuable, but we do have to abide by our legal requirements as employer to negotiate contracts. Listening to teachers is easy. Teachers love to talk. Teachers want to talk to us. Teachers want us to hear what it's like in the classroom for them. You can walk into a school and a teacher will gladly show off the artwork that their grade 3 students have on the bulletin boards outside. Frankly, if we are approachable and accessible as trustees, I think that teachers will share with us what it's really like for them on the ground. Importantly, we also have very strong union leaders that are advocating relentlessly with us as employers for rights on behalf of their teachers. Do I think that government is always fair? I don't. And as an employer, though, I have to abide by it. That's all I have.
Thank you. Candidate Gillis, I
Yeah.
see you smiling and laughing at what Candidate Eddie was saying.
I'm going to take a little bit different tact on this because I was gifted to be able to work in this district for 32 years in all capacities, in elementary, middle, and secondary, and I loved it. I felt it was a gift to be able to teach. I felt supported, encouraged, and acknowledged by this district. And primarily, I think we have such a strong professional community. The professional development within this school district, I think, helps people become the best they can be. And it helps us keep our eyes on what is most important, and that's supporting and caring for the students that are in our schools. As a trustee, I would want to have a presence in the school, primarily because I think I need to understand what's going on within the walls of those schools. And I certainly remember days when our trustees had the opportunity, pre-COVID, to be a presence in that school, to be that fly on the wall, to listen, to learn. And people, as has been said, they love to share their stories. Primarily, they love to share their stories of success, along with the things that they need to change or things that need to be given greater focus. I think we need to listen. I do think we need to give people an opportunity to communicate with us because we are, in essence, advocates. If we make a difference in the life of a teacher, they make a difference in the life of their students. Thank you. Thank you.
Candidate Hagan.
I'm going to get a little complicated here. We have a $78 million budget. 92% of that is wages and salary. Those are negotiated at provincial tables. So making changes in the classroom, along with the legislation that sometimes the government puts in on classroom size and structure, isn't necessarily what a trustee wants either, but they're just dictated to it. And right now, this one of the reasons why I want to run again as a school trustee is I want to get on the provincial bodies and sit down at the table and say, we asked for money. We just asked for some money the other day. All we told her is no. No hand gestures. But
no hand gestures.
It's incredible how distant the government is to school trustees. They just shut us down and they say no. And I'm thinking, well, who's elected locally here? I was elected to speak for our people in this community. And if our body decides this is where we want to go, they've taken our taxation away. We don't even hardly talk at the BC PC table. It just is dictated. No, you can't have that. There's your wage limits right there. There's no sitting down anymore with the government. Okay, and I think that we need powerful people who are willing to run provincially so we can change the broken system. But I value teachers in our classrooms for who they are.
Okay, thank you. All right, the next question, we'll start, the next person up is Candidate Kelly. The Provincial Ministry of Education created an educational resource known as SOGI 123, which stands for Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity. You may have different views on sexual health or gender identity than the SOGI resources provided by the Provincial Ministry of Education. How will you distinguish between your personal beliefs and your sworn duty as a school trustee oath of office?
Okay, so from what I've researched, a school trustee does not have huge amounts of power to vote in, remove, or decide upon SOGI literatures or age appropriacies. Again, it comes from the government. Or it comes from the Minister of Education, actually, who has assumed the role of childcare. So we now have a Ministry of Education assuming the role of childcare, and I suspect that we will soon see our SOGI material and sexual concepts introduced to the age of 0. SOGI materials, especially those introduced to students in grade 4, are graphic and confusing for your child, regardless of what the BC Teachers Association, its supporters and stakeholders, and the Ministry of Environment say. SOGI isn't curriculum. It has been introduced into our schools through an anti-bullying campaign. Article 168 of the School Act states that the Minister of Education may make orders on the purpose of carrying out their powers, duties, or functions without restriction, and the minister may make orders governing educational resource materials in support of educational programs. And the policy fully reveals that the minister and her recommended resources do not need to be listed in the educational program guides, and this is why it's hard to find the books. I am concerned about the age appropriacy issues within the SOGI matter, and I do stand with trustees who stand against that, and that is what I would do. I love all children. They are precious, vulnerable, and we need adults who will be standing up and say, we will protect them. We recognize their vulnerability. It breaks my heart.
Thank you. Candidate McMahon.
Wow, this is a topic that 90 seconds seems vastly inadequate to cover, but my view of SOGI is that it was created as a way of giving frame to developing a culture within schools where everyone feels safe. It is not the job of the school system to tell children what their sexual orientation or gender identity is. It is their job to help children feel safe enough that they can go on that journey on their own. I think that materials have been provided through the province and the SOGI website in order that teachers who are faced with challenging themselves in terms of meeting the needs and creating that environment within their classrooms have somewhere to turn to. They are not prescribed. They are not dictated as something that needs to be taught to children. They are simply resources that are available to support the culture within a classroom that is safe and comfortable and allows children to develop in a way that is appropriate to them. I fully support the resources.
Okay, thank you. So I just need to make a point of clarification, and I have done my own research. The SOGI 123 is solely a resource. It is not curriculum. It is not prescribed curriculum. It is there as a resource. The question for the candidates is, how will you distinguish between your personal beliefs and your sworn duty as a school trustee oath of office?
Will you repeat that, please?
Sure.
Just the last part.
Okay.
How will I distinguish?
Okay, so the SOGI resources provided by, like, you may have different views on sexual health and gender identity than what the SOGI resources provided by the ministry are offering. But how will you distinguish between your personal beliefs and your sworn duty as a school trustee in your oath of office? As a school trustee, you take an oath of office.
Right.
To uphold.
Right. So I guess my preamble would indicate that I don't have a conflict. So I would support. I have sat on the SOGI committee for our district, and so I'm aware of how it is intended to be used, and I would support that. So I don't know
So
that
you
I...
don't have a, like, it's not whether you have a conflict or not. It's if
I would say-
if your view's different, if your personal view is different,
Yeah.
are you prepared to set that aside to keep your oath in place?
I would have, if my views were different, I would have to support the corporate view of the board. It is a corporate board. It isn't a board about my personal agenda.
Right.
So I
Okay.
would support the corporate board decision.
Okay.
May I just add one that with the clarification of your question?
Yep.
I would always vote no to it. I am one person, though, and I would probably not be able to flip the table, and I probably would not be able to influence the Minister of Education, but I, as a person, would always vote no to the SOGI sexual curriculum and the age appropriacies. I love all children. I'm not about hating or bullying. I think bullying is the worst. I was terribly bullied. But I would still vote no against the SOGI curriculums.
Okay. So,
And because my belief systems do take me and lead me down the road to believe that girls who are 10 years old do not need to be read educations that are
Yes.
so sexual.
okay.
I believe we got 90 seconds each. I believe your
Yes.
question was
Okay.
clear.
I'll honor that.
Sorry, we had to reorder the question. Okay. Do you need me to repeat the question?
I think I might need you to repeat the question. Thank
Okay.
you.
So we have a provincial Ministry of Education that has provided resources, an educational resource known as SOGI 123, which are solely resources. It is not curriculum around sexual orientation and gender identity, so that in the classroom, if a teacher is faced with any of these issues, they have a place to go to find those resources to support that student, okay? So you personally may have different views on sexual health and gender identity than what the SOGI resources are that have been provided. But you, as a trustee, how will you distinguish between your personal beliefs and upholding the oath of office that you are taking if you are elected?
Okay. If I am elected, then if my personal beliefs have me questioning whether I want this taught to my child or not, then I will bring that as a parent to the attention of the teacher. As the trustee, I will put my feelings aside as it is approved as a resource. And there are a lot of people out there that might need that resource because they don't know how to help or make a particular child feel that they might be confused or not understand somebody else's family and why do, so whether I agree or disagree with that content, that is there to help those that are feeling vulnerable, and I don't want any child feeling vulnerable. And if it is used for that purpose, then my feelings aren't important.
Thank you. Candidate Eddie.
Okay, so first of all, I agree that SOGI 123 is a resource, not a curriculum. When the resource was released provincially, the Ministry of Education required boards of education to write governance policy that spoke to gender equity and inclusion in all of our schools. There is a policy in our board governance manual that speaks to gender inclusivity and equity. As a corporate board, that policy was brought forth to the Board of Trustees, and it was prior to my time. The board voted as a corporate board on that policy and the wording of such, and it was approved. We are required by our oath of office and by law to uphold the policies that the boards prior to us have set, as well as upholding the mandates as stated by the Ministry of Education. Regardless of what your personal views are on the resource of SOGI, as a board trustee, you have a legal responsibility to uphold the decisions of the whole. And honestly, I'm happy SOGI is a resource in our schools because our teachers are safe adults. And if a child came to me as a safe adult in their life with questions as deeply personal as gender, I want to at least have some appropriate language to talk to them about that. Or in turn, if that child is being bullied in a classroom, I want to be able to control the classroom environment and give that child every chance.
Thank you. Candidate Gillis.
Actually, I'd like to give Trustee Eddy some of my minutes there. That was beautifully expressed. You know, as has been pointed out, this is not a curriculum. This is, in essence, a set of resources that were approved by basically all of our major unions, CUPE, principals, vice principals, BC Superintendents Association, BCSTA, and so on. And they are there to be a support. Physical health and education, in many senses, is an effort to provide information about health and physical development. And as an educator, I can look back at students who struggled with the challenge of feeling that they did not fit, that they did not share the same feelings about gender as themselves. And at times, those take root and have a significant impact on the development of that child's life. We are there to support children. We are there to help them find answers to some of the questions. And not all questions are going to be answered, but at least we're creating an environment. And as trustees, we are meeting our legal responsibility to do that when we are trying to provide a place where equity and inclusivity are important. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Hagen.
Oh, I'm glad I get to be last. No, I'm not.
Not quite.
You know, I have a very strong moral compass. I was a minister for a while, and I still preach once in a while, but I don't let those belief systems interfere with my judgment on the school board at all. It's a corporate board. We're dealing with the law, with regulations, and so I just realize I don't have to judge people whether I think a certain lifestyle is better or worse or not. That's not my job. But it's my job to support those families at home and try to be fair. And I'm glad I don't sit in that position of thinking that I know the answers to other people's lives. I jokingly said once, and maybe I shouldn't repeat this, a bunch of parents came to me and said, Daryl, we want to put condom machines in the high schools. And I jokingly said, well, if we hadn't taken the Lord's Prayer out of kindergarten, maybe we wouldn't be putting the condom machines in the bathrooms. But the truth of it was, the answer was we turned it back to the parents for them to make the decision. And most parenting things should happen at home. We have to raise our children. You're just sending them to school, and we're doing our best with what we've got.
Okay, thank you. And candidate Harper.
At its root, the SOGI resource was created to assist in the anti-bullying programs going on in schools. I taught middle school. I know a thing or two about bullying. I also attended a junior high over 40 years ago. The junior high that I attended 40 years ago was a heinous place, bully, survival of the fittest. I'm proud of the middle schools in this district. I was proud to be a middle school teacher and walk the hallways and see that students felt safe and secure and bully-free. That was not my experience 40 years ago. And I see SOGI as merely one piece, one resource that allows to create that environment so students feel safe and they can learn to be their best. I have a stepdaughter and a son in the high school system here. They don't get why adults are so worked up about this. Because their generation, they think it's just fine. They like not having a bullying environment, and they don't know why people care so much about something that's a non-issue to them.
Thank you. Knowing that the next question goes to candidate McMahon, Knowing that you have a multi-million-dollar budget that you are responsible for, what will be your approach towards your fiscal responsibility as a board trustee?
Well, I think to begin with, we are a district that is blessed with the Secretary Treasurer, Kevin Patrick, who is an impeccable numbers man and also is firmly rooted in the strategic plan and educational goals of our district, and also has a strong commitment to transparency and consultative process of all people within the district, all stakeholders, the general public. So that's been a wonderful gift to me as a trustee in being able to rely on his judgment with full trust in his practices and judgment. I think that we've had a difficult year. I think it was alluded to that we had a deficit in our previous year of almost 2.4 million, I believe it was, and it's left us with a remaining surplus or reserve of just over 2 million, 2.1 million. There were a number of extraordinary circumstances that put us in that position, all of which were not funded by our provincial government. The provincial government required that we have 5 sick days included for all TTOC people. The absenteeism in January and February was very difficult. We're hopeful that we will be able to have a better year going forward, but I would say that our budget process is very successful.
Okay. And candidate Yasik.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Knowing that you are responsible for a multi-million-dollar budget, what is your approach going to be towards fiscal responsibility as an elected school trustee?
Well, if I am elected, there are certain things like the wages that just, that's just how it is. Looking at knowing that not everything is going to get the money that it needs, looking at different ways of advocating for more money from different provincial offices for things that are in need, as well as trying to come up with creative or perhaps out-of-the-box ways that we can use the money in a way that will serve a dual purpose, and that way it makes the money go further. Basically looking at ways, hey, how can we try and split this non-existent penny in two? And that's my answer.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Eddie.
Yeah, so budget this year has been tough. It's been tough as a seating trustee. I want to celebrate our senior leadership team, both at the school-based level and at the board office level, for keeping the cuts that were necessary, because as a trustee, we're legally required to submit a balanced budget, for keeping those cuts as far away from kids as we could. It was heart-wrenching, and we are going to continue to see deficit budgets as we move forward. Ultimately, inflationary costs were $700,000. That's unfunded money that came directly out of the SD72 education system. The way that public education funding works is that we're funded on a per-student basis. Campbell River's enrollment increases has flatlined, and that has a lot to do with our community and the lack of affordable housing and the lack of opportunities to move to Campbell River. The more families that move to Campbell River, the more kids are in our school district, the better the funding envelope is, the better opportunities we will have to provide comprehensive programs throughout our district. We are legally responsible, again, to present a balanced budget. We want to do our best to keep it away from the people in our system. First our kids, then our people. So if we can find cuts in other ways outside of employee-related cutbacks, we will do that. but it's going to be a tough few years, just like it is for everyone else in Canada right now.
Thank you. Candidate Gillis.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to confess that I'm fortunate to have a partner who understands budgets and finance, and she is very responsible. And I believe our School District 72 has a budget process that is the envy of many districts, built on relationships and trust. This is how it works. They bring together representatives from all of the unions, CUPE, teachers, administrators, and together there is a collaborative process that, although not everyone receives what they want, they come to some consensus. And I think that speaks volumes about the contentment and the satisfaction, given the fact that these have been such difficult times. Whoever I spoke to in these unions always spoke with very high praise for the current superintendent and the current secretary-treasurer. And we know that there are always going to be two givens. Staffing shoulders much of the impact, that 92%, and emergent needs are going to catch us off guard, as we discovered with COVID and unexpected absenteeism. The greatest challenge is to anticipate how to leverage services that reach our students. And often when we have an implementation model that enables us to have some positions to support teacher development, ultimately we can reach more students with less dollars. So I thank you, because I believe that we can work this together as partners.
Thank you. Candidate Hagen.
It seems like we spend most of our time talking about money, and we should be talking about the people. Am I turned off? No. It's when you start talking about, oh, we got to find $1 million, you're talking about people. I always ask that question, how many people are we going to lay off? And then you have to have that strong compass inside you to say, well, what am I willing to go to the wall for? Music, arts, culture, languages. You know what? If there are, we have to have those core values in place and say, screw the, I didn't want to say screw, but screw the money. We're going to make a deficit here because we have to, and try to come in as close as we can and to our anticipated hopeful goals.
Thank you. Candidate Harper.
Okay. I think when you follow the money, you find out exactly what is valued. There are some things that are just automatic. You have to have staffing. Those things will happen. But to me, it's absolutely unacceptable that we have staff in schools who can't get art paper, who are told they can't have a pencil, and we have new furniture in the board office. Okay? That's budgeting. That's a choice. That's an unacceptable choice in my mind, that staff are being told they have to volunteer to fundraise so they can have funds for their classrooms, so they can have art paper or crayons. And meanwhile, we have new furniture in the board office. This has to stop, this madness. It matters. It kills morale desperately. We have to do a better job of walking the talk with our budgets. When our budgets impact classrooms, and that choice impacted classrooms, it impacts staff and it impacts students. And it's not good enough. I have to get 4 votes to turn this ship around. I was around for 30 years. I know where the problems are. When I was an employee, I had to bite my tongue because I had a duty of fidelity to the employer. I don't. I want to be their boss.
Thank you. And Candidate Kelly.
Okay, so I did attend the most recent public school board meeting, and Kevin Patrick, the secretary-treasurer, did voice that we have an emergency reserve below $200,000, and that's down from $1.3 million. Our unrestricted amounts are below $400,000, and this information can all be found on the district's budget development webpage. The regulations we are required to follow are within the board's governance policy handbook. SD72 was able to deliver a balanced budget going into the 2022-23 year, and this is commendable, as it was facing a $2.1 million deficit. The Board of Education has been approved a $75,933,412 budget for this school year. And the budget was based on an enrollment of 5,669 students. The BC government has announced a one-time Student and Family Affordability Fund, and Campbell River has been allotted $600,000 to help with these rising costs of living. I will be happy to hear where the trustees choose and to be a part of choosing where that money will go and how that will help students with rising costs of living. If required to make further cuts, I agree. I don't want to see it in the specialty academics. I would suggest that enrollment is down. I have a lot of friends who are taking their kids out of the public school because they disagree with the extreme sexual education coming through an anti-bullying program.
And the next question goes, we'll start with candidate Yasik. Where'd the question go? School District 72 has experienced a critical shortage of education assistants for more than 7 years. We are not the only ones. EAs make it possible for children with complex needs to attend school successfully. What ideas do you have to address this recruitment and retention issue, knowing the tightness of the budget?
Oh, well, I know this is actually the first time I've thought about this issue, so you're getting me right off guard here. I guess the first place that I would go is see if North Island College offers this program. I'm unsure if they do, as educational assistants, and how long that program is, and looking to see if there are people in that program, if there's a way that we can entice them to stay in the area. I'm assuming if they're in it here already, or just, I guess, even help promote that and, like, stay here, help our future, because our children are our future. What if we plan to stay here and they grow up here when we're old? What they want is what we're going to be living with in our retirement. And so I'd be going, okay, maybe this is something, we could look at for even older, including myself. I was unfortunately unaware that we were that low, and that might be one of my extra things to stay here and see how the future can be.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Eddie.
So that statistical data is totally right. We cannot find casual EAs. The recruitment and retention is at a crisis point, not just in Campbell River. Campbell River, actually, we do okay by way of comparison to some of our northern school districts. So I have to pay credit to Chair of CUPE, Andrea Craddock. She came forward to the board with a really innovative solution. As I was mentioning, School District 72 has 6 new on-site after-school, before and after-school care sites, which will be the only school district in the province that are staffing those with CUPE members. So what it's going to do is it's going to create an opportunity for a 5.75-hour job per day and stretch it into an 8-hour day, which potentially creates a livable income for EAs. Working that 5.75-hour day works really great for some people, maybe those that have school-age kids, but others who want to look at the field can't support their households on 5.75 hours. So stretching out our before and after school care to CUPE members to give them first bid at having those positions may help us with recruitment and retention, because it creates better jobs in the field. Of course, we always have to look towards North Island College and create opportunities for those educational assistants to gain their training.
Thank you. Candidate Gillis.
I keep having to follow this wonderful lady who, I think she's reading my notes here. No. This is very true. Andrea Craddock is very excited about the fact that it looks like they will be able to take those hours from 5.25 hours to a full-time 8 hours, which is going to make things much more attractive. And there are 6 centers in Campbell River, and there will be one on Quadra, so I think that's going to be very significant to our community from a daycare perspective as well. I also think we have to explore some other options. How can we provide further training and make this more appealing and attractive to people to consider this? Because there are a lot of benefits to entering into the service of supporting kids. And I think if we can profile that, if we can get those stories out there, because I think our educational assistants transform lives, they make a difference, they sometimes become that person that really changes the direction of a student's life. So if we can some way promote, explore possibilities, look at some kind of shared partnerships through some of our local communities to help offset some of the funding costs, I think we might be on the right track. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Hagan.
I think a lot of it comes down to the money again, and you're only giving people part-time work. You're not getting enough to live on, and after a while you just become frustrated, and you feel as if you're being moved all over the place, and I really respect the job that they're doing. As for solutions, most of those occur at the negotiating table, and it's good when the union and our people can sit down like we have this last time around and say, well, what can we come up with? How can we improve different things? And I think we've been quite successful, but we're not there yet. There's a lot more work to do with that whole side. So I just hope we can keep enough people to make the system run properly.
Okay, thank you. And Candidate Harper.
Candidate Eddie already brought up something that I was going to mention, but I would point out that I know many, many educational assistants who left specifically because it was not possible to earn a living wage. It's a terrific job when you're in the job doing it. They love doing it, but nobody can get by on a 24-hour work week. It's not enough, especially when you get laid off every summer. So then what do you do? So many of them end up working a second or a third job. I have a good friend, she left it. She loved it, but she left. She works at the hospital now. She gets all the OT she wants. I think the other issue is we have to face facts that Campbell River's become a very expensive community on housing. It's going to be hard to get new people. I think the district needs to wake up and actually talk with the regular employers out in the community rather than being in its bubble, and also speaking with the city about what can be done to create middle-level housing, entry-level housing that people will come to this community for, because it's disappearing rapidly. What exists is occupied by people that have been in it 6 to 10 years, and they're never going to get out of it because they have rent control and they pay $842 a month. And if they move out, it's going to be $1,700 for the next person. It's a huge problem. I don't think the school board can solve that problem.
Thank you. Candidate Kelly.
So I haven't really had much of an opportunity to look at the top-heavy wages that are made in the BC education system with the employees like Jennifer Whiteside. I'd be curious to know what kind of money she makes doing what she does. I think that everybody has put out some really good suggestions and reasons why we can't keep education assistants in our schools and why it's hard to recruit them. I do agree that the prices in Campbell River for living have gone up, and most people can't really afford, if they want to work such short days. But I would also suggest that I know people who, and I don't mean to just keep bringing this back to SOGI, but it's a big issue with families, and it's a big issue with teachers. I know a teacher who no longer is a teacher because morally he has refused to do the reading materials for these youngsters, and he moved on. I know somebody whose daughter dropped out of school to become a teacher, not an assistant, but we do have people who are fully and concerned with SOGI materials and
Actually,
as a society.
You're off question.
Your question was, okay, you repeat it.
Okay. So the question is, what ideas do you have to address recruitment and retention of the EAs, specifically EAs?
Stop requesting them to sit in classrooms while teachers read extremely explicit sexual materials.
Okay, thank you. Candidate McMahon.
People are talking about it. It is a fact. There are people leaving the education system because of this.
Your time is up. Candidate McMahon?
Yes, thank you. There's a bit of a downside in being the last person on this, this question. I would agree that the QP seamless childcare proposal was very successful in terms of us gaining the opportunity to offer aides an extended workday that would also include a better living wage. But there's another piece that I think we need to mention, which is that the government sets very strict criteria for deciding who is classified as a child with special support needs and how much money is attached to that child. We have many children within our system who require additional supports, and educational aides are often being called to stretch the kind of support that they love to give and do so well, but beyond the scope of the specifics of designated special needs children. And I think that gets them down. I think that trying to be your very best and trying to exhibit all of the skill that you have in caring for children when you're being stretched thinly gets to you after a while. I think at the root of that is the need for additional funding and an additional review of what the designation for children with support needs are.
Okay, thank you. And that concludes part one. Part two, candidates get to ask another candidate a question, a candidate of their choosing and a question of their choosing. Candidate Eddie, you are first up. Who would you like to ask a question of, and what is your question?
I don't think I have a question. I know that's terrible, but I don't.
Okay, we'll move on to candidate Gillis. Maybe you'll have one by the time we come back around. Do you have a question for another candidate?
Yeah, I'll ask Trustee Hagan, because I know he's amassed considerable wisdom over the years through his trustee experience. And so I'm going to ask you, looking at all of us here, what do you anticipate will be the greatest challenge or challenges for incoming trustees or trustees who are currently serving?
There's a lot of discipline that has to occur. There's a lot of meetings. There's training up front. Now you all of a sudden are the largest employer in Campbell River. There is training that occurs down in Vancouver, but you have to attend it and be really studious, and you have to be willing to give up your individual personal points of view on issues until you can work together as a team. And that's the biggest thing is not everyone. I don't mind disagreeing with people at the board table, but once the decision's made, it's done. And it's a corporate decision. And I may disagree with it, but I'm not going to go to the press. I'm not going to go to the people who elected me because I have no one who, I was going to say no one who supports me, but I haven't gone to anyone as a special interest group to say, vote for me because of this or that. I want to be independent. And that's so critical when you're on the board. So you bring 7 whole minds around that table. That's my answer.
Thank you.
Thank you. And did you have a follow-up question, candidate Gillis?
Well, let's flip this to the people who are not currently or I should say are currently trustees. What would you say to them?
Good luck.
Okay.
That's about all I got to say is people think that you can change the world once you become a school trustee, and you find out you've only got 8% of the budget, and of that 8%, you're already spending it on most other things. By the time you're done, you maybe have 2% of this budget to really shift around. And in the meantime, you're trying to build all those different cultures and save that music program. And, you know, it just becomes an incredible, it's like all these competing interests, and you have to try to balance it in the middle along with 7 other people who may have different points of view. and then you want to work with the whole system. So there you go. That's my advice.
Thank you. You are a very wise man. Yeah.
Thank you. And candidate Hagen, do you have a question of another candidate, and what would it be?
I don't have any questions. Nope.
Okay. Candidate Harper, do you have any questions of another candidate?
Yes, I have a question of candidate Kelly. So I have been watching your Facebook post, the video that you made specifically about page 23 of a book called, as I recall, It's Perfectly Normal. A page that to me just stated scientific fact. And you expressed a degree of shock, which is your right as an individual. But I am left wondering, as a trustee, would you be in favor of banning such a book from our schools?
Yes.
Okay, you do realize, of course, that such a motion would lead to the kind of thing. Let's just say, for argument's sake, you can get 3 other trustees to go with you. All right? Chamberlain versus Surrey School Board, 1997. The Surrey School Board foolishly pursued a book ban all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada. It cost the school district $1.2 million. So if you were elected trustee, what I hear you saying is you'd be willing to go that far down the line, knowing full well you will lose at the Supreme Court of Canada. So I guess my follow-up would be to you, as a trustee who has a duty to taxpayers and a duty of fidelity to the oath that you swear as a trustee, would you like to recant your answer, or do you stand by it?
Go ahead, you can answer.
Okay, so I have 90 seconds to answer this question. I would actually can stick with my answer and want to see that this particular book is removed.
Okay, so the question that he's asking you is, would you take it all the way to the Supreme Court and cost the school district millions of dollars in doing so?
Well, if that's what it took, don't you agree that the safety and well-being and mental well-being and sexual well-being of our children is important? But let me just state it as this.
But you're not answering his question.
Give me a second.
No, you're not answering my question.
His question was far over 90 seconds long, and I can't even get 3 seconds into my answer. This is a big question.
No, it's not. It's simple.
Do you want to?
The question
is it okay that he does this?
The question, Candidate Kelly, the question is, would you ban the book, and if necessary, would you pursue it all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada, knowing that they would reject your request and it would cost the school district millions of dollars? It's a yes or no answer.
Oh, no, I have 90 seconds to answer this, and I can say no and then give my reason, right? Okay. So yes, I would actually take this book to the Supreme Court, and according to the Criminal Code, section 163.1, it states that any photograph, film, video, or other visual representation made electronically or mechanically, and that shows a person who is depicted as being under the age of 18 and is engaged in explicit sexual activities as being child pornography. And that Criminal Code also states that when and if the dominant characteristics are depicted for sexual purposes of a sexual organ or the anal region of a person under the age of 18, you have child pornography in your hands. So I don't know if it would cost so much. But if it did cost so much, doesn't every child matter? And sexual matters are important. And they can screw a person up for the rest of their life.
Is that the end of your answer? Okay. Do you have a follow-up question, Candidate Harper?
Yes, I do. So, if I understand correctly, you would be willing to cost the school district $1 million in the pursuit of folly. So, I am left to wonder, what other things would you pursue that you feel are an absolute must-do, that you sense I would disagree with?
Oh, I don't know you that well.
Oh, I think you do.
Oh,
You get a general.
My Facebook. I'm supposed to know him.
You must have a general sense that I'm a liberal atheist Unitarian who goes down the line. And I support your right as an individual to have your opinions on these matters.
Thank you.
But when you are a school trustee, you swear an oath of office to the School Act, and school trustees really only have 4 roles, ladies and gentlemen. They pass a budget, they hire and fire a superintendent, 2 associate superintendents, and a secretary-treasurer. They pass policies, boards, and regulations, and they expect the secretary-treasurer and the superintendent to make those things happen while hiring and supervising staff. Everything else is basically playing with the trains, and you don't do it.
So what is your question?
Yeah.
So my question is, to what degree would you like to micromanage the activities of the district rather than allowing the superintendent and the secretary-treasurer to do their jobs?
So
Go ahead.
So I am quite aware that as one person with this type of view at this table here, that I can't flip anything. And I also like to live a good life. So I would just place my vote as no, and then I would peacefully want to get along with every single individual here. I like Joyce, actually. I think I'd be encouraged to get to know her. And I do respect Kat Eddy. She's just like given it over the last 4 years. And I really like Daryl Hagan, too. And I don't know this guy, but I can tell that we probably wouldn't agree eye to eye on too many topics. He's very stern, and I don't know if you've seen him smile here tonight. As for Craig, I'd like to get to know him more too. He was one of my teachers at Southgate Secondary. So, I believe I answered the question in there.
Okay. And now you have the opportunity to ask a question of another candidate. And who would you like to ask, and what is your question?
So I know that Dave would be okay with this reading, but I do have a question for, and I'm sorry for this, Craig, but it's for you.
Candidate Gillis?
Candidate Gillis, that's right. Okay, so question number 1. The book It's Perfectly Normal is found within BC schools across BC, and it is not curriculum. So this book is intended for children ages 10 and up. And on page 23, there is a caricature style of an image of a young girl bent over looking at her anus, her opening to her vagina, and to her urethra. And there are many inappropriate pictures like this that do borderline against the child pornography law. So my question, would you read this, Craig, to a group of young kids? The clitoris is a small mound of skin about the size of a pea. And when the clitoris is touched and rubbed, the clitoris and the whole body can feel good, both outside and inside. It feels kind of tingly, kind of warm. It feels nice. It feels sexy. Is that something you would read to a child 10 years of age?
I remind you that this is a resource. It's a resource that is available. Would I choose to read that resource? Would I choose to use that resource? I can't tell you at this time because I don't know what the context of the lesson might be. I don't know what the curriculum might be. And so at this point, I'm going to say that I would need further understanding of the material and what other resources that I might be able to use. I may choose not to use that resource. There is nothing compelling me to use that resource. The reason those resources have been placed there is for those people who feel that that is the best way to provide response or answers to that particular child.
Thank you. And do you have a follow-up question, Candidate Kelly?
So according to the Criminal Code 163.1, that states that any photograph, film, video, or other visual representation made electronically or mechanically and shows a person under the age of 18 being depicted and engaged in explicit sexual activity as being child pornography. Do you think that this could borderline that?
Sorry, what is your question?
X.
But what is your question?
Yeah.
Do you believe that this borderlines and breaches the child pornography law 163.1 in the Criminal Code section? Do you agree that this borderlines the criminal
What is your
code.
definition of borderlines?
Let's say, do you think that this has met the criminal code 163.1 that states that photographic, film, video, or visual presentation made electronically or mechanically and shows a person under the age of 18 being depicted and engaged in explicit sexual activity as being child pornography? Would you agree that this child here is a caricature? She's under 18 and is engaged in activities and is an image that is inappropriate.
I need to see context. I need to know whether, how do you know the age and so on? Does it tell us? Yeah.
So I think it's coming down to the context, and because this isn't curriculum, it's only a resource for teachers to use. If
You're asking me if I
Okay.
would read.
Excuse
this.
me, everybody. Can we have quiet in the audience, please? Thank you.
That is not, personally, is it a resource I would use? No. Then that's the only response I think I need to make at this point.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Candidate McMahon, do you have any questions? And
boy,
who would
I
it
have
be for?
Lots. I have lots of questions.
Who would you like to ask a question of?
Well, at the risk of prolonging this part of the conversation, I would like to ask candidate Kelly for a description of how she sees an inclusive, diverse school looking. How do you create safety within a culture that celebrates the fact that people are very different and will have different sexual orientations and gender identities?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Go.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I have been called a neo-Nazi this week for my Christian beliefs, and I have been called a hater and a homophobic for my views on this. But they're inaccurate of me. I love all people, and I believe one of the first things that we were given was free will, and who am I to go against God? I think all children are important, and I think it's very important that we do not bully our children. I was highly bullied, and it's a devastating thing to go through. I would want to see every child of every age be treated preciously with math. Begin teaching math, begin teaching English, which I do believe they're doing now, but just remove these explicit sexual materials. They frig with your mind. If you've had one man or woman abuse you sexually when you were a child, even verbally, you need counseling.
Candidate Kelly?
And yeah, go ahead, please.
I'm sorry. What I was hoping you could do is paint a picture of what it would look like, not what it wouldn't look like.
It would look like adults speaking to children with respect and honor, knowing that their bodies are precious and their lives are precious. It would look like teachers reading good stories to kids that don't include showing body pictures of them naked or how to masturbate. It would look like teachers taking their kids outside and not being exclusive while teaching inclusivity. It would look like love, and it would look like children being taught that bullying is wrong, but perhaps using a different way other than these sexual, explicit, grooming stories to teach them not to bully.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have a follow-up question?
No, I think that's it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Jacek, do you have a question, and who would it be for?
I think I lost my question listening to this. So if we could come back to me if we have time, and I'll make sure I write a little more down.
Not a problem.
I'm sorry.
Candidate Eddie, do you have a question, and who is it for?
You know, I do have a question. I have a question for Trustee Harper. Or Trustee Harper. Sorry, Dave. Yeah.
Wannabe trustee.
For Mr. Harper. As a union leader, you have spoken very passionately about the inefficiencies of our school district. Can you, in your opinion, explain to me how you look towards collaboration with the senior leadership team and what your key outcomes are for a term in office?
Could you repeat the question, please?
So as a union leader, you have spoken very passionately about the inefficiencies of a school district as a past union leader. In your opinion, can you explain how you will collaborate with the senior leadership team and what some of your primary goals are as trustee over the next 4 years?
I don't believe it's the job of a trustee to collaborate with the senior management team. I believe it's the job of trustees to pass motions and policies that request of the senior leadership team to execute those policies and those motions. And so if we ask them to come back with 3 options that don't include increasing class size to save money, that they do so. I think much too much, when we're given a corporate governance model with 7 trustees, you need 4 votes to make something happen. If you want to have a consensus-based board model, then pass the policy, but that's not the policy. The policy is it's a corporate governance board. You pass policy, you pass budgets, and you expect your senior management team to do so. These trustees, the incumbent trustees that are up here, are leaving the next board of trustees with a budgetary nightmare. Now, that was a choice they made. I understand why they made that choice. They dipped into the reserves rather than making cuts, because no one likes to make cuts. But the next board of trustees is going to be left making big cuts.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up question, Candidate Eddy?
Well, I disagree with you, Mr. Harper. So are you telling me that you believe strongly in a top-down leadership style? That we won't be a collaborative team environment that addresses all of the concerns and hears all of the needs of all of our staff members?
No, that's not what I said at all. What I said was 4 votes make something happen. That's what I said. I like to try to find consensus. I've always worked hard to try to find consensus. As a union leader, I tried really hard to find consensus with management, but there were times where we couldn't, and that's what the grievance process is for. Now, as a trustee, I'm the employer. I've been a manager. I've been on the management end of boards, okay? And it's a totally different role than being a union leader. The union has a leader. She is more than capable of representing her members. I have a duty and responsible, if elected, to represent the citizens of Campbell River and look after the students in our care. I don't need to look after the teachers. That's not my job as a trustee. The CRDTA can more than look after itself.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Gillis, do you have a question?
Still a little stunned sitting here. I wasn't quite feeling the love that I was being told, but anyway, I understand it's all in the nature, and we all come at these things from a different perspective. So I was going to ask Trustee McMahon, because I have such great respect for her deep roots within childcare within this community, and I'm often asked, Trustee McMahon, what are we going to do for some of the child care challenges that we have in our district? And do you foresee any kind of further partnerships between community and school district? And I know you have insights that I certainly don't have, so I wondered if you have anything you could share at this point.
Well, thank you, Candidate Gillis. I do have a lot of thoughts, and I have a lot of hopes, and I have a lot of dreams around it. I'm not quite sure where it's all going to get to, but I have been advocating for many years of my career for a better sense of connection between what has been the public school system and what has been largely a not-for-profit early learning childcare sector. I I came onto the board because I had a real sense that we needed to better understand that education does not start at the point at which a child enrolls in kindergarten, but in fact, much of the trajectory of children's growth happens in that first precious 5 years before they get to kindergarten. So I see the turn of the Ministry of Education into the Ministry of Education and Childcare as being a step toward acknowledging that and understanding that a true system of education needs to embrace the development of children from conception through to the point at which they enter adult life. So I have a lot of optimism that we will begin to have the difficult conversations about how we're going to work together, how the nonprofits within the community and the school system as we know it come together.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up question?
No, I thank you for that, because I think it gives us some hope when I hear your optimism. I think we will move forward.
Okay, thank you. And this will be the last question before we move to closing remarks. So candidate Hagen, do you have a question, and who is it for?
I just had a comment I would like to make, and it would be very short. There's nothing wrong with having conflict on your school board. I believe that we don't all have to sit around and sing Kumbaya. But I do believe that people who are elected have to represent their point of view and defend it. But once the vote's over, it's over. It's a decision.
Okay.
And that's the way it goes.
All right. So candidate Harper, we will begin with you for closing statements. You have 90 seconds to wrap up your thoughts for us on being elected a school District 72 trustee.
Mm-hmm. Well, when I retired a little over a year ago, I had a lot of people who were telling me I needed to get on the teacher on call list. You know, I could make money and I could do French immersion TOCs because we haven't got any. And I didn't want to do that. I believe that when you retire, you retire. You need to move on. But that doesn't mean that you bail on your community. I still have my 2 children, my stepdaughter and my son, who are in Carey High. I value this community very much. And I'm deeply concerned by what's going on in this school district. Now, I think you have a pretty good understanding by now of what some of my concerns are. They're hard truths that I speak, folks. Some people don't want to hear them. That's okay. You have to make up your mind, but you can be absolutely 110% certain that if you elect me, I will move mountains if I can get 3 more votes, because I know this system. I know all the games that get played behind the scenes. I know who the favored few are that get the money. And it has to stop. We cannot carry on the way we are going. Morale is deteriorating. We can do better. And we need to do better because our kids depend on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Kelly, your closing statement, please.
So I do want to say I thank you for being here and listening, and I understand that the things that I've shared with tonight, make it look like I might be the ornery trustee who doesn't get along with anyone. But I would get along with everyone here. And I would just vote according to my conscience. As Daryl said, we need to be able to go home at the end of the night. And if it's been voted upon, it's been voted upon. I'm not a vigilante. I'm not a Joan of Arc. I'm not ready to die on this hill. If parents want certain things in their homes, then they get to have it. But I do think that parents who have voices and concerns have the legal right, and they do, to be heard. And we as trustees would have to monitor the effects that the choices we make come in. And so with such an increase in suicides and such an increase in a decline of morality and loss of VAs and all these things, I just wonder, are we cursing ourselves by the choices that we're making in the school system? When a society goes after its children in explicit sexual ways, it's not long before fire rains from heaven. And I know that sounds harsh, but I caution us all to work together in respect towards our children. And when the Minister of Education begins with the child care, I recommend that we all be careful of the books that come in there too.
Thank you. Candidate McMahon, your closing statement, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Ngila Kesla. I really appreciate the opportunity for us all to sit here tonight, and although it's awkward, I appreciate that everyone has been able to share their thoughts. I would just like to finish by assuring voters that I really am worthy of the trust that they need to put into a board that is laser focused on the success of their children and the well-being of their children in very holistic ways. I am really truly invested in striving for a world that is civil, thoughtful, resourceful, diverse, and joyful. And I think schools are a way for us to build that future. As Justice Sinclair said, as I expressed earlier, education is what got us into a mess in terms of the success and well-being of Indigenous people, and education will be the way that we need to find our way forward. I think that because of the recent expansion of the Ministry of Education to include childcare, I come with a body of experience and hopefully knowledge that I think will be very useful to a new board as we maneuver through what the expectations around that new piece of the ministry will bring. So thank you again for tonight, Gila Kesla, and I hope people will see me as an advocate.
Thank you. Candidate Yasik?
Okay. Well, I wanted to thank all the other candidates. It's been lively, and yeah, I was stunned there for a minute. I was like, whoa, came up with my question, remembered it afterwards, but I'll ask after. Anyway, there's basically, if you choose to vote for me, you're voting for somebody that is going to listen and learn and continue to listen and learn. I know that I have a very steep curve if I'm elected, but I'm going to put my everything into it, and you can be assured of that, and that I will continue to listen and learn. Please vote. There are so many events around the world that are showing us how fragile democracy is. There are provinces where they don't have school trustees anymore. They're not involved. And this is your way of still having some say in the way these things go. And the research has shown that when there are school trustees, that they can fine-tune things for the community and really help them succeed. So if you choose not to vote for me, that's okay. You get to vote for 5 of us. If I'm on the bottom 2, that's okay. Just vote.
Thank you. Candidate Eddy, your closing statement, please.
Thank you, Candidate Yarsiak, for speaking the truth about the challenges that one faces stepping forward as a community member and wading into a system as complicated as education. Education is a very complicated system. It is a large learning curve, one that I underwent myself. I was blessed to be surrounded by educators that really wanted to see me be more learned in my decision-making process. And education is complicated and it is complex, and there are lots of challenges facing us currently in education. But I personally walk through life with an optimistic attitude, and I do see opportunities where others may see challenges. I do believe deeply in the power of collaboration, the breaking down of barriers, and the valuing of every voice. I'm looking forward to gaining my seat once again at the board table and moving forward with a new team of professionals in service of the children of our region. Thanks for the time tonight, and Gayla Kessler.
Thank you. Candidate Gillis.
Thank you so much, Mary Ruth, to you and to your organizing team, and for this opportunity, and to all the people who are sitting here. This is different than I had thought it would be, and I think that's always good. I've always been somebody who embraces opportunities And I really want to have the opportunity to serve this school district as a trustee. And I spent 32 of my 34 years in various capacities. I've lived virtually every one of those experiences as an elementary teacher, as a middle, as a secondary. I think I bring that perspective, but what I hope I bring most is a sense of optimism, a sense of belief in the future. And you know, one of the things I used to try to do when students graduated, I would spend some time and I would write a personal note to them and talk to them about who I could see them as becoming as they grew. And it's so affirming to meet people in their 60s now who will say to me, you know, I still have that card. And that, to me, is what we're doing. We are building possibility. We are building optimism. We are building capacity, not only in our students, but in our staffs. I do believe in this school district. I do believe that it can be a very dynamic system that serves all students. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think, is so critical to helping us all feel that we are a part of this world. Thank you.
Thank you. And candidate Hagen, your closing statement.
Do I get to wrap up then?
You get to wrap up.
I ran a jail for 30 years. I'm used to speaking to captive audiences. Oh, sorry, that's my best joke, okay?
You should have opened with that.
I've probably been in 500 fights, maybe closer to 1,000. I've dealt with multiple murderers, rapists, killers. I've seen the worst side of society. And I was crushed halfway through my career. 2 of my bosses committed suicide the day after they retired. It was a tough job. The best times of my life have been on this school board, let me tell you. And I have such a passion in my soul still, and I've been so honored to serve for this long for you. And if you don't want to elect me in again, I think I've done my time. But I guarantee you, I will put my heart and soul in it and do the best I can, and I probably have a real big perspective, but I'll leave that up to you. And I would be honored if you would vote for me again, and I'd love to work with some of these people, but maybe my time isn't there anymore. But I still, if I didn't have that fire in my belly, I would just say, that's enough of that, Daryl. You're not going to sit around a table and grow old. Anyways, thank you so much. Thanks for hosting this tonight. And you've done a wonderful job. Everyone up in the... Thank you.
Thank you.
Honestly.
Thank you. Thank you to all the candidates for having the courage to put your name forward and participate in our democracy in such an incredibly personal way. It takes guts and bravery and courage, and thank you for demonstrating that tonight. And I would please ask everybody to please vote. It is so important. And I know candidate Jacek alluded to this. There are people around the world literally dying for the chance to make a difference in their communities. This is yours. This is the last debate of 6. I encourage you, if you haven't seen them, go on to our YouTube channel and watch them. You will learn an immense amount about every single person that is running for council, for mayor, for electoral area director, and now school trustee. Watch them. This is your responsibility as a member of a democratic society. Watch, learn, listen, and then vote. Thank you so much.